We have a verdict in the Sean Diddy Combs criminal case after all of these weeks. And if you thought that was the only major decision of the day, you would be wrong. We're going to talk about what happened on this absolutely monumental day in court.
A verdict has finally been reached in the criminal case involving Sean Diddy Combs after weeks of proceedings. And if you assume this was the only major outcome today, you'd be mistaken. We're going to break down everything that unfolded on this truly significant day in court.
Racketeering conspiracy, not guilty. Sex trafficking of Cassie, not guilty. Sex trafficking of Jane, not guilty. Transportation to engage in prostitution, Cassie, guilty. Transportation to engage in prostitution, Jane, guilty. That was the historic verdict out of the Sean Diddy Combs criminal court today. A split verdict after almost 13 hours of deliberations and weeks of testimony and evidence and arguments. The 12 jurors acquitted Sean Combs of the more severe charges, the ones that carried the stiffest prison sentence, potentially 15 years to life in prison, but convicted him of the Mann Act charges, which, by the way, carry up to 10 years in prison each, although I will tell you in a filing today from the government, it appears the sentencing range they're looking for is 51 to 63 months, so 4 to 5 years. However, there is no mandatory minimum. So would the judge go lower? We'll talk about what the defense is asking for too. And also, whatever the sentences are, would he combine the sentences consecutively, one after another? Maybe, maybe not. A lot of questions, but I'll tell you what, you would think that the verdict would be just the only big part of today. You would think that's the only major decision. Not the case, because we got to talk about what happened later on in the day. The bail hearing, right after the verdict, it was a question of should Sean Combs be granted release while awaiting sentencing, which the judge set today, by the way. Sort of set the sentencing date. I'll talk more about that as well. But I mean, let's talk about Sean Combs. He's been locked up since September 2024. He's been denied bail at each turn. There was a change of circumstances here. He had just been acquitted of 3 of the charges. So could he make bail? We're going to talk about it. All right, so to discuss the hearing and more, let me bring on, once again, hopefully not for the last time, but we're at basically the end of this case until sentencing, joined once again by long crimes in court reporter Elizabeth Milner. Great to see you. First of all, your reaction to the verdict. Is this what you expected? Because let's really briefly explain what happened yesterday. That, you know, we thought it kind of gave us a preview into what would happen today. Not necessarily so.
Yeah, I was not going to lie, Jesse, a little surprised by the verdict in that I really kind of thought there was a really strong case for count 2, that obviously being sex trafficking as it relates to Cassie Ventura. And that was only because of the questions that the jury was asking when they were bringing some notes back. And that was kind of in relation to what had happened at specific instances that the government point out were allegations of sex trafficking. So I thought because of the tone that was inside the courtroom, the way the family was getting a little bit emotional sitting inside the gallery, even Diddy's demeanor, for the most part, we've seen him kind of really keep up his spirits. But yesterday was really a time where we kind of saw, I think, the weight weighing in on him, that it's possible a conviction on some of the more serious charges were going to happen. And so when the jury came back not guilty on count 1, 2, and 4, you know, I was a little surprised, especially to count 2, but, you know, I do respect the jury's decision. They spent a lot of time listening to this case, listening to all the testimony, listening to all the evidence, and that was the verdict that they had rendered.
Yep. I wasn't surprised that they found him guilty of...
He gave a slow nod, like someone who had already anticipated the outcome. His lawyers patted him on the back, relieved smiles breaking through the tense silence. But the judge remained still. He didn't share in the moment. His stillness spoke, louder than the decision itself. Then he addressed the court. Regardless of the jury's decision, this court cannot, in good faith, approve bail. The silence was heavy. The entire courtroom seemed to freeze. Diddy's jaw tightened. His brief moment of relief vanished. He leaned in, clearly confused, almost chuckling in disbelief. His lawyer turned to the judge, visibly shocked. "Your Honor, the defendant has been cleared of all the major charges." The judge stayed firm. "Even so, this court has substantial reasons to believe Mr. Combs remains a potential threat to witnesses, to the court's integrity, and to public safety." Bail is denied. The courtroom erupted. Diddy shouted, "You can't do this. This isn't justice." But justice was already moving toward him. Two federal officers approached without hesitation. They secured his arms and placed him in handcuffs. Right there in the courtroom, the judge didn't react. This isn't about guilt or innocence, he continued. It's about power. It's about interference. It's about silence bought through fear. The courtroom descended into chaos. People shouted. Journalists rushed to capture the moment. Cameras flashed in the hallways. Diddy's defense team attempted to protest and request an immediate hearing, but it was already done.
To engage in prostitution, we have been saying for weeks on this show, that felt like a straightforward path to conviction. Wasn't surprised, not guilty with Jane, given some of the gray areas of her testimony, but also the jury didn't even ask for one readback of her testimony or anything to do with her testimony, so it made me think they might have already been decided there. I was surprised about Cassie Ventura sex trafficking just because, like you said, the readback of that testimony, and then shortly thereafter, they came back yesterday and said, we have a verdict on that charge. So I thought, they're convinced. And when it came to racketeering, I thought they were still going to be hung because they said they were at an impasse yesterday. It seemed like based on their note, there was no way that would change. The judge told them to continue deliberating. They come back today, and like in an hour, they come back not guilty on racketeering. I'm not really sure what that split ultimately will be. Maybe the jurors will speak out and we'll hear. Got to ask you about Diddy's reaction. Okay, so we have courtroom sketches of what it looked like. You were in there. What was his reaction to the verdict?
Oh, he was very pleased with the verdict. Obviously, I think for the defense and the defendant, that being Sean Combs, I think obviously they would have wanted an acquittal on all the charges. But I think given that they weren't a conviction on the more serious charges of RICO conspiracy and sex trafficking as it relates to Cassie in one charge and Jane in another charge, I think overall Combs was very, very pleased with the jury, to the point where I saw him kind of mouth a little thank you to the jurors as they were still sitting kind of in the jury box, as they were kind of leaving for the end of their day. Obviously, we still had some more matters to address for our end. But in terms of just his reaction, even his family's reaction, Jesse, I think they were so happy knowing that there's such a strong possibility that their father will come home. Obviously, if he would have been convicted on the more serious charges, that might have been a different discussion. But given that he was only convicted on count 3 and 5, that being the Mann Act, it seems like given that it comes with a lesser penalty and sentencing, I think the family is like, yes, our father is coming home, our loved one is coming home, and we hope to see him very, very soon.
And talk about a reaction. Outside that courthouse, my gosh, what has been going on out there? There's verbal disputes, people spraying things. Just give us a brief summary of what you've witnessed outside that courthouse after the verdict.
I've witnessed a lot, Jesse. A lot was going on. There was kind of, I will even say, pandemonium after the verdict was read. And outside, a lot of Diddy supporters, a lot of people who are kind of with the Free Diddy, I wouldn't say movement, but I guess, they believed in his innocence. They were very pleased, even thinking that it was a possibility he'd just walk outside of that courthouse at some point. But it was a lot of commotion. I did see some people getting to some heated debates, especially in relation to Cassie. I saw some people getting very upset because they believed that the government was trying to take a good man down who did a lot for the culture. Those types of conversations were being had from a lot of people in the public. I even saw some kind of weirder things, and that being people squirting baby oil on themselves. And one of the reporters even got some on her shirt by one of the people who were kind of over in that area. And so a lot was going on, to the point that I think the courthouse police were just kind of like, okay, we need everybody to calm down. They have barricades going all the way down the street. I think in the event that Sean Combs would have walked out of that courthouse, it would have just been straight chaos, I think, outside. But for the most part, especially with that not happening around that time frame, that a lot of people, especially his supporters, were very pleased. And obviously for some, they were a little disappointed with the verdict, but for most that we could see here at the courthouse, a lot seemed pleased by today's decision.
So, Elizabeth, let's talk about what happened next, because right after the verdict, it goes into the idea of, can he be released on bail? Okay, and the judge set a hearing for 5 p.m. So later on today, you literally, at the time of this recording, just got out of there. Remember, from a legal point of view, the burden is on the defense to show that Sean Combs is not a danger or won't flee. What was the judge's decision? And
the decision was final. Diddy was heading back into custody. But this time, it wasn't about what could be proven in court. It was about what had become widely understood. Jane was present again, seated quietly in the corner. She didn't shed. Tears didn't react outwardly, but her expression revealed everything. Even though the legal system had cleared him, the truth had a deeper reach. Within hours, social media was flooded with confusion. How could someone be found not guilty but still be detained? Experts clarified the situation. Judges can lawfully deny bail after an acquittal if they have valid concerns that the accused might influence witnesses, escape, or intimidate others involved. And had Diddy done that, he had already faced accusations. On all these fronts, investigations showed Jane's text messages had been tracked, her phone monitored, and private detectives confirmed she had been followed. Former staff members admitted they were paid to raise doubt, shift timelines, and more than one witness reported receiving anonymous threats. The judge wasn't convinced by the smiles or appearances. He looked past the surface. He reviewed the confidential files and made a decision that would leave a lasting impact. Diddy was quietly escorted out through a back exit. This time, there was no public walk, no media statement, just heavy doors and silence. Meanwhile, additional charges were being put together, serious allegations that hadn't been formally introduced yet. These included financial fraud, suspicious wire transfers, offshore accounts that weren't disclosed, and allegations of bribing witnesses. The jury may have declared him not guilty, but freedom was no longer his because this case was far from over. It wasn't just about a trial anymore.
Especially when you're talking about all these people who they're orbiting him, they're all trying to advance their own career. And when the lawyer got up, when the defense attorney got up and said, Cassie got $30 million as a result of her settlement, right? And that was a big move.
Yeah, I wasn't sold for that personally, because I was like, the prosecution came back and be like, she already settled. What's her incentive to come here and lie? You know, what's her incentive to be a part of this? And that for me, but I think the messages, the conduct that arguably contradicts someone being a victim, and I know there's complicated factors between an abuser and a victim, the trauma, I get it. I totally understand it, but I wonder if that's what settled the jury. Okay, I want to move past the verdict because now we have to talk about what's happening next. First thing, when the sentencing hearing is going to happen. So they have this hearing next week about whether to expedite the sentencing, happening before October 3rd. If both sides agree, great. If they don't, what is a compelling legal argument for the defense to say, we want this sentencing to happen much sooner?
Well, I mean, we know that behind the scenes, what they want, of course, is they expect a chance that he's going to be released. So that's their big motivating factor, of course. Whether the court abides by that, I mean, it is a substantial change in circumstance. He was acquitted of all of these serious charges, right?
But he was just denied bail. He was denied bail again.
He was denied bail again, and I actually learned that on your segment yesterday afternoon as I was sort of doing my preparation for this. But we have to remember that one of the things that he got in trouble for, that Diddy got in trouble for in jail, was using other inmates' calling number. Remember that? So he was calling witnesses in the case from jail using other inmates. That was a direct affront to that judge. That was remember, we had all those attempts at bail that were denied at the very beginning of the case, one after another. This judge, and it's the same judge who's going to sentence him, denied that over and over again. And you and I, again, in another conversation we had on your show, we both said he is screwed now, that he's got no chance because he's violating the rules of the court while in jail. So if he's disobeying the rules of the jail and the directive of the court while he's in custody, how can he be expected to actually follow the terms of a bail agreement when he's out of custody?
Right.
And I think that chicken is coming home to roost again. I mean, I think that's what happened yesterday afternoon. That any judge who has a criminal defendant who behaves like that is an affront to the court itself. It's disrespectful to the court. Sure. And it's almost like he couldn't get out of his own way there at the beginning. But he had an excellent defense team.
He does. So assuming for a moment, whenever the sentencing hearing happens, right? Let's say it happens in a month from now. Let's say it has October 3rd. The question is, what's his sentence? As we mentioned, the prosecution in a filing from yesterday talked about the guidelines range being 51 to 63 months. Now, this is before a pre-sentencing investigation and report. Now, the defense, right, they want 21 months. He's already served almost 10. Talk to us about what you're thinking here, because there is no minimum. The maximum's 10. If the judge were to combine it together, like you said, 20 years, feels highly unlikely that would happen. as we're talking, what is a pre-sentencing report investigation? How would it affect this? What do you think the judge is going to do? There's so many different factors to consider here. And it's not like a murder case when it's like, okay, we know what's going to happen. It's like life in prison without the possibility of parole. It's a given. There's room here. What do you think the judge is going to do?
So in federal court, this is actually very interesting. They rely very heavily on those pre-sentencing investigations. So essentially what will happen is there'll be a federal probation officer, and they do these for almost every case, where they will do their own investigation, where they'll talk to family members, they'll talk to employers, they'll talk to neighbors, and they will make a recommendation to the court as to suitability for release, suitability for time. And that's something that federal judges traditionally really adhere to. They tend to put a lot of weight on those, far more than they do in state court.
This was the slow collapse of an empire. And Jane, she didn't flinch either, because she understood this was just the beginning. The hidden tapes, the private vault, the handlers, the quiet cooperation, none of that had truly been explored. Yet, now that Diddy was in custody, people started speaking openly and without hesitation. His close associates began to turn. Anonymous sources released names, locations, and key documents. Business deals were called off. Partnerships were suspended, celebrities removed photos, and many went completely silent. Everything was falling apart, bit by bit, because even when the legal system gives you a second chance, the truth can still pull you back down. And in that courtroom on that day, no verdict could change what was already set in motion. Did Diddy lose just a legal battle? No, he lost his grip, and that control was the foundation holding his entire empire together. Now, the barriers were gone, and what followed was only the start. The next morning, prison authorities confirmed Diddy had been placed under continuous 24-hour monitoring. This wasn't for his personal safety. It was due to the overwhelming number of threats, requests, and attempted bribes that flooded the system just hours after he was processed. Surveillance footage later showed 3 unidentified individuals trying to access the intake area. All 3 were detained, and none agreed to provide any information. At the same time, Jane's legal team filed a motion to unseal records that had previously been restricted under gag orders. Inside those documents were sworn statements from 5 former employees to artists and 1 international advisor. All described the existence of a parallel system operating behind the scenes.
For him to be found guilty, whereas Mark Agnifilo was like, okay, well, where's the line drawn? If they're doing 75 different freak-offs and 76 is a little different from the first 75, is that make him guilty of sex trafficking? And that was really kind of the message that he was sending to the jury. But in terms of just counts 2 and 4, specifically related to Cassie and Jane, and when it comes to Cassie specifically, Mark Agnifilo is like, okay, I suppose you can sex traffic your girlfriend if you sell her into prostitution. They're swingers. This is a lifestyle. Again, kind of that was a common theme throughout his closing, was that this was just an alternative lifestyle, that these were just swingers, and these were just people who were engaging in threesomes, that they were adults, that they were making these choices. And he kind of said something interesting where he was like, okay, well, if your partner likes anal, but you don't like anal, do you stop doing anal? It was kind of really like an oh my god moments a little bit, because I saw some people in the gallery kind of just be like, what did he just say? But in terms of just Mark Agnifilo kind of painting this as consensual, he was saying that this is what people do who are in love. They do things that maybe they don't necessarily want to do, but they do it because they love their partner, and that doesn't amount to sex trafficking. So when it comes to Cassie, he was saying things like your likes and their likes become one, and Cassie wasn't necessarily clutching her pearls at the ideas of doing freak-offs. And then the defense pointed out those 3 instances that the government alleged were clear instances of sex trafficking. That was what had happened at Cannes Film Festival, something that had happened with Daniel Phillip in 2012 after a freak-off where Cassie Ventura was beaten and then was forced, according to the government, to still do a freak-off. And then they point to the Intercontinental Hotel incident. But one thing that was interesting, Jesse, is that they played the Intercontinental Hotel video during the defense's closing argument. And Mark Agnifilo really kind of took it piece by piece, but I think most notably, he skipped the part where Sean Combs is seen on that surveillance video dragging, beating, kicking Cassie Ventura when she was on the ground. And so in the defense's argument, they were saying that this whole thing was just domestic violence, that this is not sex trafficking. And the defense used one of Cassie's own Instagram posts against her, specifically the one after this CNN surveillance videotape, which we now know to be kind of a snippet of what had happened in 2016 at the Intercontinental Hotel, where Cassie made this post after kind of seeing this amount of support, where she was saying, you know, domestic violence is the issue. Mark Agnifilo kind of pointed it out to be like, okay,
Diddy allegedly operated these networks across several countries. This was no longer just about parties. It involved transport routes, shell companies, digital evidence, and whistleblowers who had waited for years to see an opening. Then the tapes surfaced. They were brief, unclear, but difficult to dismiss. A voice, reportedly Diddy's, was heard giving instructions. The footage briefly showed contracts, substances, documents, and blurred faces. Locations were verified against previous testimonies, and metadata was confirmed by experts. The judge had not reviewed all the footage yet, but prosecutors had. They were prepared. From behind bars, Diddy requested a meeting. He wanted the court to reconsider bail, but the judge had already issued a written decision. Until every investigation is complete and all protective orders are respected, this court will not revisit the matter of his custody. Diddy's legal team filed 2 appeals, both denied. In the media, the conversation shifted. The focus was no longer on the not guilty verdict. The attention turned to obstruction, bribery, witness tampering, and international trafficking. Through all of this, Jane remained silent, but other voices started to emerge. One artist shared how their career stalled after refusing to cooperate with after-party demands. A former pilot provided a statement confirming numerous undocumented flights to private villas, all paid in cryptocurrency. A therapist testified that over the past 10 years, 3 separate clients had described similar patterns of abuse, each pointing to one individual, Sean Combs. The story kept expanding because when a system built on fear begins to collapse, it often collapses quickly. And Diddy, he wasn't watching from the top anymore. He was watching from inside a cell. Each new revelation was a clear reminder. Not guilty doesn't mean protected. It simply means the truth took longer to surface. But now it was fully awake and it wasn't going away. Don't forget to like, subscribe, drop your thoughts in the comments, and hit that bell icon so you never miss the next big celebrity drama.